Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our fourth webinar in the Reuse webinar series. Today's webinar is going to be about resources that are available for helping all of you to develop your own reuse programs or projects within your own communities or schools or businesses. And we have three speakers with us, but before I tell you about the speakers, I wanted to just go over some details regarding the webinar. Let's see if I can just... Okay, before I go any further, I'm obligated to show this disclaimer. Part of the way we've been able to present these webinars is through a grant that we got through USDA. So this is a disclaimer that's required through that grant. But I want to make sure that all of you are familiar with how to use some of the features for GoToWebinar. There's a panel on your right-hand side, and that's shown on this slide here. Within that panel should be a little cross that says questions, and that's illustrated here. Throughout the webinar, I encourage all of you to post your questions, and we will probably get to a few questions in between each speaker, and then at the end of the webinar, we'll concentrate on the rest of the questions that have come in. But I encourage you to add your questions as we're going through the webinar. I also wanted to let you know that we've posted the handouts of the presentations for the webinar, and that's under the handouts little cross. You'll see it. It should be in one of the items in the list in this right-hand side panel on your screen. Those are PDF versions of the presentations. There may have been some slight changes that have been made by the speakers since we posted those presentations, but the majority is still the same. And then if you're experiencing any technical difficulties with GoToWebinar, a good way to address them is just to get out of the whole program, to come back in and redial in, just start it new. And that's a good way. If you're still having trouble, then you can go to that 800 number on the screen. I want to tell you just a little bit about who we are. The Northeast Recycling Council, we call ourselves NERC, is a 501c3 organization. We've been around for 28 years. We work on reuse, recycling, organics management, and green purchasing issues. We are comprised of 11 states. We're a regional organization. We work most directly with the 11 Northeast states, but we do also work such as webinars that are available nationally, and we also have worked on projects from outside of our region too. We work directly with communities, schools, and businesses, and we are able to do this through federal and state grants, but we also get individual contracts, whether it be with a specific community or a business, to work on a very concrete project to help the entity get further along in whatever it is that they're trying to do as it relates to sustainable materials management. So we've been working on reuse for a number of years, and we provide a lot of assistance through direct technical assistance and through trainings. So the trainings include in-person trainings where we're with a group of people really getting into the details about all the different reuse opportunities that there are for people to engage in. But then we also have webinars like today's webinar where we invite people from all over. It could be from within this country. We've even had a number of people from Canada and some from Europe as well join us on this reuse webinar series. The other thing we do is the direct technical assistance, really working, providing hands-on assistance to helping both the planning and the implementation of reuse projects and programs. And this has been both to create events as well as to help set up reuse networks. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the, oh, actually, I'm not going to go that far. I'm going to introduce our first speaker is Mary Ellen Etienne, and I'm going to ask Mary Ellen to talk about some of the work that she does on a national basis for reuse. And Mary Ellen is the CEO of Reuse Institute and the executive producer of Reuse Connects, which is a national reuse event. And we have one upcoming in October, and I'm sure she'll talk about that. She has been working in reuse for nearly 2 decades. Prior to the Reuse Institute, she ran the Reuse Alliance, Reuse NYC, and New York Waste Match. She also worked at the London Community Resource Network and Materials for the Arts in New York City. Mary Ellen, I'd like to.
Thanks, Mary Ann. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. So happy to be here with you and the webinar participants. I will apologize ahead of time. I do have allergies and a bit of a cough, so apologize for that ahead of time. So I'll start off by telling you a little bit about myself and the Institute. I'll provide a brief introduction and the definitions and drivers related to reuse, especially people, this is your first of the 4 webinars. I'll provide an overview of the reuse community itself, and we'll finish up by providing a set of resources that can help you learn more. So like Mary Ann said, I'm the CEO of the Reuse Institute. As you can see from this list, I wear many hats within the industry. In addition to helming the Institute, I oversee our signature event, Reuse Connects, which I'll talk about more. I also sit on several regional and national boards within the sustainable materials management sector. And doing so helps ensure that reuse is properly represented at the local, regional, and national tables. So a bit about Reuse Institute. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're based in Dayton, Ohio, and our mission is dedicated to increasing awareness of reuse, which we see as a central tenet of sustainability, and we do so through educational events, training services, and research projects. Start off just by using the definition that we use internally for reuse, and that's extending the life of a product, and that's you could do so by using it more than once in as is, or perhaps as a new function through creative reuse. And by taking a useful product and exchanging it without reprocessing it, we're able to retain the embedded energy and the resources that were used in its manufacture. One point of clarification, there's actually 2, this is the first. We like to say that reuse always reduces waste, but reduce doesn't always include reuse. And for example, if you're a manufacturer and you retool your equipment to reduce the generation of byproducts, so getting them before they become waste, that's source reduction. But if you sell that byproduct to a reuse center in your neighborhood, that's a reuse activity. So that's one important clarification. And the one that we always face is when I talk about reuse, recycling. Actually, reduce and reuse are not recycling. I'm sure everybody on the call is familiar with that, but just to make that clear, so reuse or downcycling is the process of breaking down a used item into the component materials and then using that material to make new. Just a quick side-by-side comparison to really hit the point home. If you're talking about business strategies in reuse, and you can use this as well in your home or at school, but if you're looking at different components of where reduction and reuse happens, this gives you a good comparison. So if you refuse to work with non-recyclable packaging, that's a waste reduction or source reduction strategy. If you require vendors to use reusable pallets, that's a reuse activity. So I have a few more examples for you there in the office and kitchen as well. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we like to call the reuse community. It's a very broad set of organizations, and it can be any type of a legal entity. You can have nonprofits, for-profits, government agencies, or cooperatives. And within that community, we have the reuse organizations themselves. And if you think about conventional reuse, that's your thrift stores, your building materials reuse organizations, perhaps your food recovery organizations. You also have the rental and sharing, and that could be physical spaces where you rent and share materials, or it could be a web app or something like that that allows you to share. There's creative reuse, which is a personal passion of mine, upcycling and design. There's deconstruction, reclamation, adaptive reuse. So, you know, you can deconstruct a building or a whole block and repurpose it. That would be adaptive reuse. Of course, reusables and refillables. Very big in Europe. We'd love to see more of that happen here. It's slowly starting, but we'd like to see where we kind of were back in the 50s. A refurbish, repair, remanufacture. This is a huge part of the sector. It's gaining more ground day by day. As well as other reuse stakeholders. So who are your corporate partners, the activists, the educators, and the regulators, economic development partners, whatever the case may be, anybody that is interested in seeing waste and become resources and be reduced and reused, those are your stakeholders. So that's a little bit about the reuse community. In terms of drivers for change, where we see in the reuse community, these are some of them, they're not all of them, but I just wanted to touch upon them. But now that we're in a global economy, global climate change is a reality, and we need to deal with it. Whether it's a drought on one side of the world, perhaps, or the other, or a flood on the other, your way of life is affected, and the way you run your business is affected by situation thousands of miles away. So we really have to kind of think in terms of this global economy we have now. Obviously, consumption of resources, it's steadily on the rise. We have a limited amount of non-renewable resources, and we really need to ensure that we're good stewards of these materials. Municipal solid waste is also on the rise, and it continues to do so, and we spend more time and money and resources dealing with the ever-increasing amounts of trash we create. So we really need to start to look at that and implement reduction and reuse strategies to deal with it. Although unemployment is leveling off, underemployment continues to be a factor in our global economy, and certainly reuse provides green jobs. And the final kind of what we call a negative driver is also one of the biggest, and that's just lack of awareness, public awareness. We continue to see people disposing materials in environmentally unfriendly ways, and we're looking to help that. So what are the opportunities? So a little bit of good news. So some of the drivers that are helping make seismic shifts in how we look at the world and how we do business. One of those is a switch to systems-based research. And this graph on the bottom right is just an EPA report from 2009, which shows that they used to look at waste as only 13% of greenhouse gases, but this new systems thinking put it in terms of the emissions associated with the extraction of materials and the provision of services. So that's 42%. And while that might seem like bad news, it really has elevated the importance of waste management. So it is a good thing. There's also a shift to sustainable materials management, or SMM. And it really is about making better decisions about the end of a product's life cycle during the whole course, and the use and reuse and using materials across the entire life cycle. So SMM conserves resources, reduces waste, and slows climate change. And so rather than looking at our systems in a one-way linear make, take, and waste, we look to redesign them and make sure they're cyclical in nature. And so we hope to design them so there's no such thing as waste at the end, and materials are kept in the production loop. And so zero waste is really emerging. It's not new, but it's really starting to gain ground as this comprehensive system that addresses resource use from product design to disposal. And lastly, engaged consumers and corporate stakeholders are more and more interested in environmentally preferred purchasing and product stewardship, so that's always a great thing. So what are some of the benefits? We'd like to talk about the triple bottom line, or people, planet, profit, or prosperity, as some people say. So reuse is socially responsible, it's environmentally friendly, and it's economically beneficial. And some of the many things, and we'll talk about the factors, but it provides low-cost, high-quality materials to individuals and organizations in need, provides a meaningful living wage employment, it promotes resource conservation, and it also provides a ton of economic benefits. And in fact, one thing I'd like to say is, this was a quote I did for treehugger.com, and that reuse is the original green-collar job. And there was a study by the Institute for Local Self-Reliance based on some EPA-based data that looked at, if you've heard this a million times, maybe heard me say it before, but when you take 10,000 tons of material, if you incinerate it, you create 1 job. If you landfill it, you create 6. If you recycle it, it's 36. But if you reuse it, it's anywhere from 28 to 296, depending on the materials involved. So perhaps textile reuse is less energy intensive, people intensive than perhaps computer repair. So now we're going to switch topics, and we're going to talk about the resources that Reuse Institute provides. And we do a source of different programming. We have some things that are open source, some things are low cost, and other things are full service. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. So first and foremost, we have our Reuse Library. It's an online library that's open to whomever would like to have access to it. It's a Google Drive that you just you request access from us from our website. And we have certain organization-generated materials that we've developed and provided. We also, there's access to public reports and our articles, and also within the reuse community, we ask for people to share their operational documents as templates or guides on how other people can run their reuse organization. So just a little bit about our reuse primer. This is something I wrote a couple months ago, I believe, and it really provides the basic guidance on the field of reuse. So it's kind of what we talked about here in the beginning, but expanded upon, and explains reuse within the context of the hierarchy, the waste management or materials management hierarchy, and offers in-depth definitions. So all the different kind of subsectors and facets of reuse I mentioned are all defined. It goes into much more detail about the triple bottom line benefits, and we talk more about those challenges and opportunities. So people tell me it's a pretty good, useful tool, so please check it out. The Reuse Movement Toolkit, it's in beta. It's also on the library, and it provides a step-by-step guide on how to get your reuse network. So your community in your city, state, whatever the case, whatever your reuse community is, how to get it up and running, how to increase awareness about your work, find financial support for your efforts, and improve your network through communication and evaluation tools. So likewise, please do check that out. Some of the other things, this is not from us, we didn't generate it, but a fantastic study that has recently been updated, in fact, but this is from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. You may have heard of it in the previous webinar, but I always love to refer to it because they found that reuse was quite an economic driver in the state. It employs about 46,000 people, creates generates $4 billion in gross sales annually, and has really helped prove that reuse organizations and businesses are locally owned and operated, and really increase capital retention within the community they're located in. So stuff like that you can find in the Reuse Library. You can also find out some operation documents, guides, tips, strategies. So there's strategic plans, donation policies, how to start a lending library that came from ShareStarter, and a fantastic guide on organizing community swaps, which is from New Dream. Those are kind of the things that you'll find in there. Reuse Institute also has a Global Reuse Council, and that's basically, it's our technical advisors that act as a think tank. There's international representatives. We have the bulk of our representatives are from the US, but we also have Canada, UK, and Australia. And so we come together to work on certain projects. So we have determined, you know, where the we voted with our feet and basically who wants to work on what, because it's a volunteer effort. And so the two main projects we're working on now is the Reuse Sector Data Standard and the Speakers Bureau. And I'll dive into that a little bit more. So the Reuse Sector Data Standard is a common language and methodology for tracking the triple bottom line benefits of reuse, which we mentioned. And these are some of the things that we hope to track. So the number of tons diverted, the money associated with avoided disposal and purchase, and the value of the donations, if that is in case donated, revenue earned, number of green jobs created, and families assisted, et cetera. So that's led by John Davis at Mojave Recycling in California. So thanks to him for getting that started. So we're just in the early process. We are looking for other stakeholders to join us. We're looking to find out what's being done around the country. So there are some efforts, like I mentioned, in Minnesota and New York City, two of which I was involved with early on. So, you know, finding out what's scoping, what's happening, and how we can kind of create this national standard so we can all really elevate the industry and say we have this information and we can get it out to the public. Another thing we're doing is a Speakers Bureau, and that's really just to provide expert speakers. So are you, from a state recycling organization? Are you from a city that has a sustainability film festival? Whatever the case may be, we're trying to help connect you with the speakers that would fit your need. So these are just a few of the folks that are signed on already. We're going to have all of our technical advisors on there shortly, but we're open to other speakers too. So if there's anybody else, please do get in touch. So those are kind of our open source resources, things that we're creating for the greater good and getting them out there, and they're free. So we do have some other services that are low cost entry point. Our first and foremost is Reuse Connects. It's a biennial international reuse conference and expo. So the first one was in Raleigh, North Carolina. The second was in Portland, Oregon. Then it went to Austin, Texas, and this next one coming up is in Boston, Massachusetts. And we're really excited. We have fantastic partners with Massachusetts Department of Environment, EPA Region 1, Harvard University, the list goes on. So we're really going to have some powerful speakers. It's an excellent networking opportunity. There's nothing like it, to be perfectly honest. Just about reuse. And we also have really fun and exciting special events. We have a refashion show, a silent auction, some other fun things. We're also new this year. We're going to be doing a gleaned meal. So we're going to be working with local restaurants to provide a gleaned meal for our attendees. And we're also going to be screening the movie Reuse Because You Can't Recycle the Planet. We also have something called Master Reuser. It's a webinar-based training program, similar to this, but we do it in a cohort training. So people apply, and we have a small class of about 15 to 20, and they take part in 8 3-hour sessions, and some of the topics include goal setting, stakeholder management, development issues, marketing, social media, the like. We talk about retail and logistics, risks and liabilities. You name it, we cover it. I jokingly say it's a mini MBA for reuse entrepreneurs. We also offer customized training for businesses, municipalities, and nonprofits. I recently did our introduction to reduction reuse for Ingersoll Rand and their green team. We're happy to do that for other organizations, either live or via webinar. We can help plan for reuse and zero waste and implementing reuse policies and so forth. There's also a new concept we've come up with, which is a living reuse lab. It's kind of like a combination of Reuse Connects and that it's in person with the training of Master Reuser. And so it's a new concept that we're looking to bring about in 2016-17. Some fun things that we also can come to your neck of the woods and help do, or we can help you organize. We offer reuse roundtables. We recently did one in Louisville and we can help educate and galvanize your reuse community in your city. And what's really unique about this is that we can just come together, bring the different stakeholders and players together and see what the local challenges and opportunities are, because they're always different wherever you may be. So some are the same everywhere, funding, logistics, and so forth, but occasionally there's some other local issues that come up. So, and the other thing we did in tandem in Louisville, and we've done this elsewhere around the Midwest, is we've done screenings of the new reuse documentary. It's called Reuse Because You Can't Recycle a Planet. It's by Alex Eves of Stay Vocal, a reuse apparel brand. And it's a great 60-minute piece. It's a great conversation starter. You can do it alone or in tandem with the roundtable. And it's just a great way to get people together and get the conversation started. That's especially good for people that aren't deeply involved in reuse and trying to get them in. So it's a great public education thing. So a little bit about our full service consulting. Again, we can come to your community, business, institution, whatever the case may be, with a team of experts, and we can help you either incorporate waste reduction and reuse into an existing zero waste plan or sustainability effort, or we can help you, do it from new or add to an existing one. And that, of course, depends on what your needs are, and we talk more to you about that. So here's a little bit about the references and the links I've mentioned. So Marianne will make this available to you later, so you can click through and have these handy. And please do keep in touch. Here's my information. Please check us out online, reuseinstitute.org. We're on Facebook and Twitter. Likewise, you can find Reuse Connects, and always hit me up by email, maryellen@reuseinstitute.org. That's it.
Thank you, Mary Ellen.
Thank you.
I wanted to just say we've gotten a few questions in, and I wanted to invite more people to post their questions in the questions box on the right side of your screen. And I know we have Athena Bradley, my coworker, behind the scenes, and she's going to be asking a few questions right now for Mary Ellen. Athena?
Okay, Mary Ellen.
Okay.
Interesting question, kind of a statement, and it'll be great to have your opinion on this. Relative to closed-loop recovery hierarchy, how do you make a distinction between upcycling, which involves sourcing non-recyclable scraps, versus activities that use otherwise recyclable materials, such as bottles and cans, and turns them into products with no recovery option? Charming as it is, a child or an adult who creates an art project by hot gluing beads to a bottle, that's really downcycling, don't you think? Should we not be clear about this language?
Oh, absolutely. Creative reuse and upcycling, generally speaking, we say it adds value. So taking wood scraps from, and the one picture I had shown you that had a beautiful cocktail table. And so that was byproduct from an industry. It didn't really have any value except to maybe downcycle it or recycle it into sawdust. But they were able to reclaim it, and make a beautiful piece of furniture that has intrinsic value as a table. It's aesthetically beautiful. So that's when we talk about creative reuse and upcycling. Yes, that's what we're talking about. Crafts, when you're making, perhaps jewelry out of old typewriter keys or something like that, that's something that will stay beautiful for years. When you're talking about a kid's craft, when you're taking a plastic bottle and you're cutting it and making it into a work of art, and then eventually it is recycled. Yes, those things are totally different. And when I talk about creative reuse and upcycling, think more in terms of viable products that add value to a waste material.
Great, thank you. relative to your reuse library, is there a charge for that, and do
No.
people access that through your website?
No, no charge. Please access away. You'll find it on our website. The link is in the webinar, but if you go to reusinstitute.org resources, there's a link under Resource Library. We just make it an access link so we can keep track of how many people check into it rather than just having an open drive. So it's free and open. And in fact, if you have any resources you want to share, I'm happy to give you access to add them, or you can send them my way and I will add them.
Oh, nice. And on your database, your reuse database, do you have any timeline on when that might be done and how people will be able to access that?
Are you talking about the data standard, I think?
Yes.
In terms of we have just gotten our technical advisory subcommittee on that, our reuse and metrics. That's getting going now. We're creating the framework for it, and that's that scoping I was talking about. Then we're looking to fundraise around it, and we think it's something that's really viable because there are things out there happening kind of over here and over there, and there's not one system. So we're really looking to bring it all together, all the wonderful work that has already been done, and seeing how we can come together and make a push forward. Because until we have one system in a way like EPA WARM, but WARM is the WARM model, is really just focused on commodity-based recycling. So we'd love for what we're doing to be open-ended and open source so people can use it. You know, the reuse community can use it for their benefit. But it's a work in progress.
And that'll have like standard weights in it, like
yeah, weights and values. Ideally, right. Weights and values for commonly exchanged materials. Like we're not going to have every little tchotchke on your shelf, but we'll have a steel desk and a laptop computer and like kind of basics, a bicycle, So those kind of, whenever you're dealing with averages, sometimes you're going to be a little high, sometimes you're going to be a little low. But if we all agree to certain terminology and that methodology, that's where we'll help tons of people do what they do more efficiently.
Okay, great. And thank you. And audience, please put in your questions in the box, and we'll be asking another round after Damon's presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Mary Ellen and Athena. Obviously, the conversation shows that our audience, which is of about 110 people at the present time, is very interested in finding out more about reuse and the resources that are available. So Mary Ellen did a great job in presenting her work with the Reuse Institute and as a national organization, the resources that are available through them. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the work NERC has done as a regional organization in working with communities on developing their reuse projects or programs. So we have a reuse training that we have worked with individual communities in presenting the idea about reuse and all the various opportunities that reuse can take, and try to work more directly with the community to help them identify what reuse activities make sense for their communities. And then we help implement those projects or programs with them. So we also hold the webinars like today's webinar. And then we also out of our projects come various resource materials, which I will talk about in a few minutes, but it helps to provide those resources. What I mean to say is those resources are available for free. They're on our website. Anyone can download them so that you can duplicate reuse efforts in your communities. Let me just get my presentation to advance. There we go. So one of the examples I wanted to share with you is Athena our question asker, had worked with the St. Regis Mohawk tribe, the Akwesasne tribe in New York, to develop a community garage sale. This is an area of low-income families who were trying to make reuse work for them to benefit the community. And here's a picture of their event. As you can see, it was very well attended. People were very excited and interested in being part of and participating in this event. Another thing that we did was we worked also in New York, and that's the USDA grant I mentioned earlier that allows us to do today's webinar. Also allowed us to work with Jefferson County, which is also known as the North Country in New York, for a toy swap, which is another wonderful reuse event where people in the community bring their toys that they no longer want, and others who are looking for toys for their children can come and get the toys they're looking for. So this event was free so that the people who were picking up the toys were able to do so at no charge. So this happened before Christmas, which was a great way to help the lower income families in particular to get the Christmas presents for their kids that they wouldn't otherwise have been able to afford. So Athena worked with this group to help organize that event, get the toys in, get it announced throughout the community, get the toys cleaned, get them organized into categories, and then to have that event work. And here's some pictures from that event. So you can, they had organized the various toys. It was a very clean and organized manner of getting these items very clearly displayed so that when people came in, it was easy for them to find what they were looking for. Another community that I worked in was Lyons Falls, which is a very small village. It's on the western side of the Adirondack Mountains, and don't know the population offhand, but it's a very small community, although very widespread geographically. They hold an annual event for the village, and as part of that event, they were interested in developing a flea market to have as one of the things that was going on during that event. So the vendors were really happy that this was going on because there isn't any other town-wide flea market in this particular town. And if you can, I just want to point out too that another reuse activity that was going on at this event is the top right picture. And there are, what's showing on that picture are baskets made up of items that were taken from the local thrift shop, and then they created a raffle to raise money for the church through the reuse of these items that came through the thrift shop. So reuse, these are just examples of how reuse can take shape and form in many ways, and it really depends on what's important for the community. At the, I believe it was the Akwesasne event, and Athena can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but they also had demonstrations of how you can deal with organics management and building compost bins from reusable items, because that was something they were also interested in. So they very clearly defined building those compost bins as part of the effort they wanted to promote when they were thinking about reuse for their community. Another community that Athena worked in is the St. Lawrence County. It was a 3-college move-out program, and you see some of the pictures here. from that program, and that was to allow the colleges, Clarkson University and SUNY Potsdam were two of the colleges of the three, where they were able to have a way to get students to bring those items they no longer wanted, instead of throwing them out when they were ready to go home for the school year. They had a way to have a swap for these items so that others could make use of them, a great reuse opportunity. And I just wanted to point out that there is a YouTube video of this particular move out in my list of resources, so you can get a better idea of how that might take place and how you can get the students involved in that. Another area that I have focused on quite a bit is textiles collection. And it was to both raise the awareness of individual towns and those working in towns to understand the issues and the ways you can go about collecting textiles for reuse. And some of the groups that I've worked with on textiles has been transfer station operators with a state's Resource Recovery Association, and getting the word out through their conference attendees by providing a training. It was also through a webinar in working with the recycling coordinators who are also responsible for reuse in their towns. So this webinar was to help those coordinators in Vermont to better understand reuse, what are acceptable reuse textiles for reuse, and how they could go about setting up those programs in their town. The other way we promoted textiles reuse was through one of the webinars in this reuse series. It was entitled States Charging Ahead with Textiles Recovery, where we had 3 different states, Northeast states, who have chosen to promote the collection of textiles as a way of building and ramping up their programs for sustainable materials management. So that was Rhode Island, New York, and Massachusetts. Those resources are on our website, and my presentation has a bunch of links in it, as with Mary Ellen's. And again, all of our presentations are available as handouts, which you can access on the right hand of your screen in that in the webinar box, and it appears under handouts. So I just wanted to make sure that you are aware that all of the presentations and the recordings of the webinars, the reuse webinars in this series, are available on NERC's website. And here are the links to them. So this webinar that we're on right now will also get posted. All of the resources will get posted to NERC's website if people want to access them later on as well. So if midway down this page you'll see, and I'll put my cursor there so you can see it, the Clarkson University Take It or Leave It Move Out video is the video I referred to earlier for that 3-college the 3-college move out, take it or leave it program that they had for getting rid of students' unwanted but reusable and in very good condition items. And I'll just bring you down to the bottom of my page here, where I've done quite a bit of work on C&D reuse. And the one item that I thought was most applicable for this webinar is reuse in remodeling and new construction. So, and then there is another event food waste diversion guide. So there's a lot of different, you can see even from these lists of resources, there's a lot of different ways that you can implement reuse. It doesn't have to be only one way. you can really consider reuse in whatever activity you are presently engaged in. It may take a little creative thinking, but it can be done. Some of the new resources that NERC is presently working on is a Reuse Explorer guide, where we have laid out the different reuse opportunities that are available to people in this country that we are aware of, and it will include case studies of groups who are currently implementing reuse programs in the various categories, and also just provide links to more resources and more information of those who have been effective in implementing reuse programs around the country. We're also working on food recovery tip sheets and compendium. So as Mary Ellen had mentioned earlier, that the Reuse Connects will have a meal served from gleaned food. Some of the work that we will be doing in these tip sheets will be tips about how you can use some of those food items that you may not be currently using. So it could include those things that people might consider to be ugly or just not attractive on the table, but how you can make those food items attractive and be part of your meal plans. So just to give you a few more ideas. So here is my contact information. We are, as I said earlier, we're a nonprofit organization, and we work with organizations through the grants that we receive, but we also get hired by individual entities to do specific work. So that's always a possibility too. So I'm going to stop there and see if Athena has any questions that have come in.
No questions right now, Mary Ann.
Okay. All right. So we will move on to our next speaker, who is Damon Carson. And let me just get Damon's bio. Damon is the owner and president of Repurposed Materials. His company currently has locations in Denver, Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas, and Philadelphia. And he previously owned a garbage company. So he comes at reuse from having a previous history of seeing things thrown out quite a bit. But before you get started, Damon, I just want to say that our intent for the webinar was really to provide you with these different perspectives of reuse and the resources that are available both in online resources and staff resources that are available to work with you. Damon brings a different kind of resource where it's him and his staff who are the resources to making reuse work. And he's going to provide you with a presentation to help you see how his company is dealing with reuse. Damon?
Yes, ma'am.
You are all ready to go.
Excellent. Now, are you seeing my screen, Mary Ann?
Yep,
Okay.
I see your screen just fine.
So I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone. So as you said, we're going to focus on a form of reuse. I guess in Mary Ellen's earlier words, we're probably adaptive reuse. We call that adaptive reuse, repurposing. And let me see here. For some reason, my slides are not advancing.
Make sure your cursor is at the bottom.
Oh, are you seeing a
go.
stage now, Mary Ellen?
Yeah.
All right, Mary Ann.
This is Mary Ann. Yeah, we do see a stage.
Yeah, we were making a joke earlier that we have Mary Ann, Mary Ellen, and I'll be Mary Damon. So just to keep it a trio. But anyway, the best way to introduce it, and we're on the industrial side, so we talked earlier about, some of them talked about toys and garage sales. We're very much focused on reusing and repurposing industrial waste streams. So what better way to introduce it than a little magic show? I'm going to show you a waste stream, in this case, a military cargo parachute. Common diameters, 35 feet, 64 feet, 100 feet. They drop tanks and jeeps and supplies out of big cargo airplanes. At some point, DOD, the Army, decides they're end of life. So a little hocus pocus, and that becomes a shade canopy for a backyard wedding. Interestingly, the number one buyer, our number one buyer of these military parachutes are brides for backyard weddings. They run Christmas lights up in them, and they're just a neat shade canopy for backyard weddings. Next up is a steel propane tank. Note that earlier we talked about recycling. My definition, recycling, chip it, shred it, grind it, melt it. So most of these propane tanks reach end of life. They get cut up into 3-foot chunks and they get melted. But again, reuse, can we do something else with it? Again, with the Magic Show, we're going to borrow a little bit from the world of gymnastics. Just like a double flip is a little higher degree of difficulty than a single flip, we're going to try for a little harder double repurpose. So we're going to try to turn this single propane tank into 2 different things through repurposing. So a little hocus pocus and a double repurpose. On the left, barbecuers, meat aficionados, turn it into smokers and barbecue grills. On the right is a San Francisco artisan who uses the particular angles and curvatures along with the cutting torch to disassemble a propane tank and then reassemble it into park benches. Next up is conveyor belt. Rubber rolls of conveyor belt can be 24 inches wide, 36 inches wide, up to 6 feet wide. They convey coal and copper and stone and rock all over America. It's a wear part, so at some point it becomes obsolete to the mining industry, the primary industry. And so we're going to try for the very, very difficult triple repurpose, so a little hocus pocus, all kinds of things you can ways you can adaptably reuse or repurpose old conveyor belt, whether you're a park and rec district, a farmer, a rancher, a car collector, a motor freight company, all kinds of things you can do, repurpose, extend the life of old conveyor belt. So that's industrial repurposing, but okay, bring that back down to a little bit lower level potentially if you're not in big industry. So we like to talk about the Quaker Oat cylinder. In a first life, it was made to take the oatmeal from factory to store, from store to home. At end of life, did this cardboard cylinder ever just go right to the recycle bin? Probably not. Of course, you made a drum out of it. Interestingly, just last week, a favorite preschool project, in fact, utilized the Quaker Oat cylinder for a leprechaun trap. So all you St. Patty's Day fans can look up on Pinterest or whatever a leprechaun trap, but the underlying start of those is an old Quaker oatmeal cylinder. Next up, a Maytag refrigerator box. First life, meant to protect a high-value appliance in transit. Likewise, probably never goes directly into the cardboard recycling. Instead, a kid will get a hold of it and create a playhouse, a fort. Again, repurposing. What's interesting about America is we are born with the resourceful gene. Unfortunately, abundance is the enemy of resourcefulness, and America is a land of abundance, and so we're just so used to click, click, click. We want a red dress in medium, and Amazon has it there in 2 days. So again, abundance kind of breathed out the resourcefulness. So one of the things we're trying to do in this whole reuse movement is get people to be resourceful. So again, we're going to, what we are not, we're not recycling. Again, I already mentioned that. We're not chip it, shred it, grind it, melt it. But we're on the reuse side. But again, just setting up definitions, typical reuse is a boat, a forklift, and a refrigerator. There's a used secondary market for all three, but in a second life, a boat stays a boat, a forklift stays a forklift, and a refrigerator stays a refrigerator. In our words, these are specialized. A Ford truck will stay a Ford truck, a ceiling fan will stay a ceiling fan, etc. Again, secondary markets for them, or used market for them, but probably they will do in their second life what they were made to do in their first life. Contrast that to repurposing, where it gets a very different second life here. Railroad timbers, treated railroad timbers, no longer good to the railroad industry. They get repurposed as landscape timbers. And what's funny is you probably are scratching your head, say, yeah, I knew that. And that's what's fun about repurposing. Some of these have been around for decades, for generations, that you don't really think about as being a repurpose, but that's not why they were cut into 8'6" lengths, 6x8 and treated. The reason they were made that way is for the railroad application. Just so happens they make good landscape timbers, fence posts, etc. Old tires, no longer good as tires because, again, not unlike conveyor belt, it's a wear part. They get repurposed as boat dock bumpers and fenders on tugboats in marine applications. Again, been around for decades, for years. We don't really even think about that, but that is not why Goodyear and Michelin created those tires. But marine operators have figured out a adaptive reuse or a repurpose for them. Barrels, steel barrels, plastic barrels, liquid containers in their first life, cut the lids off. You got containers, you got trash cans, all kinds of things old barrels get repurposed as. So I would lump these three into what I would call familiar repurposes. Another one that we all know is old wine barrels, oak wine barrels, end of life for aging wine. It's sliced in half, and they become planters for flowers and gardeners. So let's talk about less familiar repurposes. So these are the big advertising billboard vinyls on the sides of the roads, Budweiser, Coca-Cola, Chevrolet, big square footages, 10 by 36, 14 feet by 48. A lot of them are even as big as 20 foot by 60 feet. So 1,200 square feet, printed picture on it. Think about February 15th. What was yesterday? Valentine's Day. All those billboard advertisements that were encouraging the men to buy their leading ladies a diamond ring are now obsolete. It's February 15th, so those get taken down, and they are basically trash to the primary industry, the advertising industry. A little hocus pocus, and they become great waterproof tarps for building supplies, hay tarps for covering hay for animals, boat tarps, pond liners. If you want to be the all-American parent or grandparent, they make a tremendous slip and slide for kids. We sell a lot of them to boys and girls clubs. Interestingly, a couple years ago, we had a Army Ranger Battalion in Fort Benning, Georgia. They were building a maze for a training exercise, and they needed a curtain material so one soldier couldn't see the soldier on the opposite side. Again, a curtain wall to build a maze. So rather than buying something new, they decided to save money and divert something from the landfill. They bought a bunch of billboard vinyls from us to use as the curtain material. After all, at the end of the day, they just wanted to not be able to see the soldier on the other side. Old bowling alleys, we may have some in our listening audience, some 250 bowlers. We might have some 189 average bowlers, and then, like myself, some below 100 bowlers. But we are probably familiar. This is kind of a dying sport. The golden age of bowling is certainly behind us. A lot of these bowling alleys getting shuttered. What happens to old, thick, hardwood maple? A lot of times it gets thrown in the trash can, but in a second life, they make excellent workbenches. What is a workbench made new made out of? Typically, they have a wood tabletop. So here is a source of used maple wood that has all the performance characteristics of new. So why not repurpose something? Old street sweeper brushes. You can see that red thing. It's kind of hard to see, but the street sweeper brush behind the rear axle, I'll tell you a little bit about them. If you stand them on in, they're about 5 feet tall. It's a steel pipe with plastic bristles sticking out. Interestingly, at end of life, the steel recyclers aren't interested in them because of all the plastic, and the plastic recyclers aren't interested in them because of all the steel, so they become, in our language, hard to recycle or contaminated because there's two different materials. So what happens to them? Most of them end up in the landfills. There is absolutely one repurpose for them. They make excellent back scratchers for livestock. We have markets for these all over the United States with dairy owners, horse owners, interestingly, zoos. There's a lot of happy rhinoceroses and elephants in zoos around the country because of these old repurposed street sweeper brushes And if any of you have any big ideas, I would not recommend these for household use because those bristles are rather prickly. So it takes a tough hide to enjoy these as a back scratcher. So one of the things we get asked is, so what kinds of materials make a candidate for repurposing? Obviously, a boat, a forklift, a ceiling fan can be reused, but what makes a candidate for repurposing? So we've set up a little grid with SAVE, Save It. So the S stands for standardized. The more standardized a waste stream, the more it's a candidate for repurposing. So if you have a random bunch of lumber that's 2x4, 2x6, 2x8, 23 inches, 42 inches, 68 inches, and 97 inches, that's not nearly as easy to find a second home for as if, hey, all of our waste stream is 2x6 and they're 27 inches. That gives you a chance to find that unrelated industry that might need 2x6s 24.5 inches. Then you'd only have to lob off 2.5 inches of all yours and you have a fit or a repurpose. So standardized. Next up is availability, the A. Is this a one-time waste stream within your company, within your organization, or your industry, or is it recurring? Think about conveyor belts that we already talked about at mines. Those last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So your particular, if you were a mine, may not be changing out any conveyor belt this year, but within the industry, your competitor across town or in the same county or in 3 states away may be changing out their conveyor belt this spring. So within the industry, that is a recurring waste stream. So with these recurring waste streams, it's helpful because then you start figuring out what other industries can use them. And like anything, it's nice to have more available coming down the pike when you find those connective dots. V is versatility. We use this in combination with 3 words. We look for byproducts and wastes that are generic, versatile, and adaptable. Generic, versatile, and adaptable. So a lot of you are probably sitting in an office right now watching this. You look around your room. You have probably a door. If you would take that hardware off of that door, that whether it's metal or wood, it's probably generic, versatile, adaptable. It could become a shelf as an example. You look up at your computer monitor, if nothing else. Very, very specialized. Not a lot you can do with that computer monitor. A lot of times I give this presentation live and I point at the very projection screen that the PowerPoint is being displayed on, and I say, now that material is generic, versatile, adaptable. What other things could we do with that screen that is the projector screen? So again, when things are generic, versatile, adaptable, we often say, we don't know what industry. It may be the cranberry farmer in Michigan. It may be the copper miner in Arizona. It may be the golf course superintendent in Florida that raises their hand and say, hey, we can use that material to solve an operational problem in our industry. Interestingly, with cranberry farming, I eat cranberries every Thanksgiving, but I've never been to a cranberry bog. I have no idea what kind of operational problems they are trying to solve. But again, you show something generic, versatile, and adaptable, and that cranberry farmer might raise their hand and say, that works. Here's a great example, a roofing paver. So these on most flat roofs in America, school districts, warehouses where there's a flat roof, there's insulation, there's a rubber membrane to keep the water out, and then there's some kind of weight or ballast. A lot of times it's river rock, which probably you're familiar with. Sometimes it's these specialty pavers. Notice they're flat on top and corrugated or fluted on the bottom. That fluting or channeling allows the water to wick through to channel to the perimeter gutter system and get off the building and down into the storm drains. Generic, versatile, and adaptable. You show this to 2 different industries and they look at it completely differently. You show it to a landscaper and he looks at it flat side up. Great patio pavers, stepping stones, etc. Conversely, you show that to a livestock owner, he looks at it opposite. He flips it. He looks at that fluting or corrugated ripples as great attraction for his animals amongst the mud and the feces, etc. So again, generic, versatile, adaptable. Industrial people look at that waste stream through their own particular industrial lens. So this is an interesting example of that. E is engineering. We use that also in combination with 3 words. What are the waste stream's attributes, characteristics, and engineering? In other words, what did it do in its first life? Was it waterproof? Was it windproof? Was it hollow? Was it heavy? Was it magnetic? All these different things. What did it do in its first life? What engineering does it have it built in that can give you a clue, or what other industry could embrace some of that attributes, characteristics, and engineering? So I'm going to show you, this is not the best slide because I don't have a good before picture, but on the lower right is a big mining tire, 10-foot tall mining tires used on huge, huge dump trucks out here in the western United States in the big surface coal mines. Just like tires everywhere, big major disposal problem to the mining industry. Well, cowboys have figured out you slice them in half like a bagel, throw them out in a pasture, pour concrete in that center hole, and you have a water tank, stock tank, that'll last 50 to 75 years out in the pasture. Now, interestingly, think about attributes, characteristics, and engineering. Goodyear and Michelin put 2 and 3 inches of steel and rubber in these tires, not to make a great water tank for cattle. Nope, they put that engineering into these tires because they had to hold up in a very high, abusive, heavy loads. They don't want these tires blown out. They can kill people. They're so big. So Goodyear and Michelin put that engineering, in this case 2 and 3 inches of steel and rubber in it, to make a great long-lasting tire. It just so happens that that same engineering, again, 2 inches, 3 inches of steel and rubber, make it a great stock tank. If any of you have been around livestock, a 1,500-pound bull can give a good old kick to a galvanized stock tank, the upper left photo. First week, it can be completely ruined. It's got to go to scrap metal. Contrast that with this old mining tire. A 1,500-pound bull and his brother could jump in there and have a little bucking rodeo and not even touch the tire. It would never even hurt it because, again, of all that 2 and 3 inches of steel and rubber. Again, Goodyear and Michelin put that engineering in because of its first life, but it makes it ideal for a second life. Another example of attributes, characteristics, and engineering. Here's an old flat car from the rail industry. These last 30, 40 years, and then they get retired. Typically, in the case of this rail car, they cut it up into 3-foot chunks. They send it to a mill. The mill melts it down, and they create, new I-beams. But look very closely at this rail car. Characteristics, attributes, and engineering. What's already present? You got 2 axles and steel I-beams that span 2 axles. You have all the elements already present that make a great bridge. So to remove the axles, you remove the knuckles, and you just put it in place, and you have a bridge. So rather than cut it up into 3-foot lengths, send it to a mill, melt it down, create an I-beam to be brought out to a job site, that I-beam gets created and used to make a new bridge. So why do we go through all that extra process when we could just adaptably reuse it or repurpose it as is? So how do we get our crazy ideas? I have a bad habit of insomnia, so I read trade journals, wire, rope, and sling technology news. What I'm doing is trying to see what products are being made new that a used material could be substituted for it. Notice upper left, substitutionary thinking. So this is a sleeve protector, a sock, if you will, meant to protect a high-value sling, and they make these new. And we say, how is that protective sleeve fundamentally different than old fire hose? Decommissioned fire hose, retired from fire departments, cut that up into 3-foot, 6-foot, 9-foot lengths, and run your chain through it. Again, what is a fire hose? It's tough jacketed material. Interestingly, as it relates to our business, we just took in, that helped the U.S. Forest Service divert 100,000 feet of fire hose, 20 miles of fire hose from all the California wildfires last season. So right now we're sitting on a whole lot of fire hose, but that's kind of the business. Substitutionary thinking. What can you do with an old fire hose? Number one repurpose for an old fire hose is boat dock bumpers. Boat owners wrap them around their boat docks. Again, taking advantage of their attributes, characteristics, engineering, the tough jacketed material that it is. Here's an interesting one. Yes, I have an odd reading mix, Poultry USA. Again, you flip through the magazines looking at the ads. What is being made new? Middle of the three products is Nest Pad. Nest Pad is simply 1.5-inch plastic shag carpeting. If they roll it out under the hens, when the hen lays her egg, it drops on this Nest Pad. It's cushiony, so the egg doesn't break. Where else in life is 1.5-inch plastic shag carpeting used that's being thrown away by the hundreds of thousands of square feet? Every athletic field in America has turf that they're throwing away. And what is turf in this new generation of turf? 1.5-inch plastic shag carpeting. So we're not saying these would work. We're just saying, would it work? How is that fundamentally different than this new Nest Pad that's being made? Interestingly, since we're talking about the Northeast, we did the soccer field from Harvard, took a whole soccer field from them. I think it was about 1.5 years ago, so it was a fun joke around our company that we were selling Harvard Yard. So yes, plastic turf, all kinds of repurposes for old turf. So remember, SAV, that means it's a candidate for repurposing. Just because something's a candidate for repurposing doesn't mean it's going to be commercially successful, just like in the movie making industry. There are movies made that receive critical acclaim. The peer group thinks they're a wonderful movie. They might win an Oscar award. They receive critical acclaim. That doesn't mean it's going to make $100 million at the box office. It doesn't mean it's going to be a commercial success. So in the movie world, critical acclaim and commercial success are two different things. In the world of repurposing, candidates for repurposing are very different than commercial successes. So here's some of our, I don't know if that's failures, but things that didn't become commercially viable. Hot air balloon fabric, SAVE standardized. Lots of them are the same size available. Retired hot air balloons are getting retired all the time, getting thrown into the trash can. Generic, versatile, and adaptable. Engineering, character attributes, thin material, very colorful, perfect candidate for repurposing. Will never be a commercial success, though, for one reason. At end of life, they absolutely reek. All those propane fumes oxidizing in there, they're put away wet. Think about when a hot air balloon lands on private property, they quickly throw it together, put it in the van, and get out of there. Not that it's illegal, but they want to move off that person's property. They're never allowed to dry, so they stink. Absolutely reek at end of life. Think about the number one repurpose for a military cargo parachute. Interestingly, similar fabric, backyard weddings. Could you imagine a backyard wedding if suddenly there was this odor caused by the shade canopy? So not a commercial success. Here's one of my favorites. This last summer, American Airlines called from Dallas, Texas, 2 jetliners a week. They replaced the inflatable evacuation slides, and we think, oh, that is awesome. That would be perfect. A party barge behind a speedboat on the local lake. We showed this in our newsletter. And again, generic, versatile, adaptable. One zookeeper even looked at it and said those would make great fall pads when we anesthetize our big animals, elephants and rhinoceroses, because when they anesthetize them, they fall over. I told that story to my wife, and she started tearing up. And I said, honey, what's wrong? That's a great story. She says, but you're talking about euthanizing the elephants. I said, no, I didn't say euthanize. I said anesthetize. So when they put them to sleep to perform medical procedures on them, they flop. So again, generic, versatile, adaptable, 2 different industries look at it completely differently. Interestingly, absolutely not commercially viable because FAA rules, they have to be certifiably destroyed by American Airlines, United, Delta, etc. And again, it makes sense. They don't want these to end up on a third-party, third-world airline, Nigerian Airlines, etc. There's a reason we're retiring them, but it's just kind of sad because these are absolutely a candidate for repurposing, but with the current rules, they will never become commercially viable. Escalator handrail, we've all touched it 100 times. Malls, airports, generic, versatile, adaptable, available, standardized, all those words, but this is one where we just haven't gotten great traction with something. Most of the applications, like landscape edging, would be one that a lot of people think about with this, but think about landscape edging. It's extremely cheap. There's no way you can ship, or why would you ship something from, say, Denver to Rochester, New York for landscape edging, when in Rochester, New York, you can go buy down to Home Depot and buy a very cheap product to landscape edge. So again, good candidate, so far not a great commercial success. So now we would like to expand your concept, your understanding the mission of repurposing, outer limits. So you can take this repurposing, very different Second Life concept, to all kinds of things. Think about real estate, old salt mines, big caverns, the mines, first industry goes in and excavates salt. When they leave, there's these big, huge rooms. Notice on the left, they leave columns in there to support it so the whole structure doesn't collapse, but it's abandoned, left to just sit there by these mining companies. Real estate people know they make great document storage as a way to reclaim or repurpose the space. Think about what's naturally present underground. Temperature, stable humidity, security. Everything that real estate developers are spending hundreds of dollars a square foot to create new above ground for document storage are naturally present attributes, characteristics, engineering, naturally present underground. Food, cheese, moldy, off spec, out of date. What happens to old cheese? Of course, it could go to a compost pile and be turned into more dirt, but is there a higher and better use, to borrow a real estate term? Interestingly, fish bait companies love any kind of off spec, out of date cheese because they make bait out of it. Typically, they buy new, but when they get a chance to buy and lower their dollar cost averaging, they love to buy old off spec rotted cheese. Catfish, in this case of bass, love it. Off-spec, out-of-date, tomato-based products, spaghetti sauce, tomato paste. Think about characteristics, attributes, and engineering. What's naturally present in a tomato? Acid. What could you do with that acid? The copper industry likes to repurpose old tomato-based food products as copper cleaner. So again, you're taking advantage of what's naturally present, or again, attributes, characteristics, and engineering. Think about...
I'm going to have to interrupt you for a sec because we're running out of time, and I know we have a few questions that I wanted to make sure you had time to answer. So could you wrap it up?
Yeah, I'll just show you three more slides. Old cement mixers, you save the mixer and the drum, and it goes to lighter industries like landscaping. They throw wood chips in there and dye and mulch them. Here's an old military Coast Guard cutter from the Canadian military. Gets repurposed as a expeditionary yacht. Again, the hull was fine. It held water, so it just needed a repurpose. Chemistry, old isopropyl alcohol gets repurposed as was disinfectant. Now it's a solvent in the printing press industry. Old car paint is a great additive for seal coat. So here's chemicals. Here's a fun one. Rice and glass shards got mixed together in an explosion. They didn't want to send it to the landfill, so a very enterprising crayfish farmer threw them out. Both sunk to the bottom, the rice and the glass shards. The crayfish picked up the rice and ate it and left the glass on the bottom. So we are at the intersection, is repurposing and reuse, at the intersection of affordability and sustainability. Back to you, Marianne.
Thank you, Damon. It was so interesting, and we never seem to have enough time. So, but I think you did a great job in showing us all the different possibilities that reuse can afford us. I'm going to just ask Athena to read us some of our last questions.
Sure. Quickly, Damon, I know this is probably an involved answer, but can you kind of go over some of your operations, transportation, logistics? I mean, do you store this stuff in a big warehouse? Do you make just online exchanges? How do you actually orchestrate all that?
Yeah, good question. So the 5 locations previously referenced, we have big warehouses, so we take something in, like we did Northeast. We did a big waste stream with Wegmans Seafood Market. They had a bunch of insulated carts. I think we had 6 or 7 semi-loads. They were retiring. They were obsolete. They were going to the landfill. They reached out, can you help? So we took all of those insulated carts to our Chicago warehouse. Wegmans got to wash their hands of them with the promise we gave them that we would keep them out of the landfill. But it takes time to find homes for these things. So it took us about 9 to 10 months, but we found homes for every single one of their insulated carts. So, and then as far as logistics, we just work out deal by deal. Sometimes you pay freight, the organization that has the stuff. Sometimes we pay freight. Sometimes we actually pay for products if we think there's sufficient value.
And how do you make money off of all this? Do you have a charge, a fee, standard kind of fee?
Yeah, so then we are, at the end of the day, we're an industrial thrift store. So then we put a price. So we sell conveyor belt for so many dollars per square foot. We sell parachutes for a 35-foot parachute's $180. So that's how we make money, is by selling these waste streams.
And so the businesses, do the businesses get a cut?
Well, that all depends on the deal up front. A lot of times our offer is, we'll come and get it. We'll save you the disposal fee if we think it's very low value. Today, as an example, I bought 18,000 pounds of Tyvek material from a Nebraska company still on the rolls. They were making a product with it. That product didn't do very well, so they had, hundreds of thousands of square feet of this Tyvek material. So in that case, I offered them a monetary amount. They accepted it, and then we'll bring it in. And so the transaction is done. We'll pick it up. We'll give them the check, and then it'll take us 6 months or 12 months or 18 months to sell through it.
That's great. Question for both of you. What made each of you get into reuse, and kind of where did you start? Again, just kind of quickly. Mary Ellen?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good? Okay. Oh, goodness. Okay, quick. I kind of grew up with Depression-era parents, so reuse, they were green before green was a thing, and reuse was just kind of part of our way of life. But how I got into the field in terms of my career, I was in publishing and advertising, made a change, became a AmeriCorps Vista volunteer, I think the second class, and on-the-job training in terms of the 3 R's, educating folks, and just very passionate about reuse, started at Materials for the Arts, and the rest is history. So.
Wonderful.
I did want to say, though, thanks. I've gotten a flood of requests for the library, so
Great.
thank you. Great. And Master Reuser, just before, if I plug it, closing up March 31st for this round. So if you want to get into it, please do so. Okay, sorry, Damon.
My story is not dissimilar, as Mary Ann in the introduction mentioned. I had a garbage company. You'd open the garbage truck doors and be dumping out stuff. And what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? That looks perfectly good. I have a propensity to shop at thrift stores, drive used cars myself. So I'm just a used junkie, I guess. Just ask my wife.
Yeah, you have a lot of fans out there, Damon, because I've been following you for years, and I know a lot of people have. For the both of you, again, what opportunities do you see in reuse on down the line here? What do you see coming up?
Oh, I think it's just starting to really gain traction. It's amazing. I've been in the industry for 20 years or so, and people are really starting to get it. And that light bulb moment is happening all around the world. And, we're just coming up against it. Global climate change, peak everything. People are really starting to look at waste prevention and reuse and repurposing as the way forward. And we welcome that.
I think one of the things that I've seen, I certainly haven't been in it 20 years. I started the company 6 years ago, 2010. But I think there is what's very interesting to me is recycling gets all the love, because guess what? You still get to buy a new product. You still get the new shopping experience when you buy something that's made out of recycled material. It still smells new, because in a lot of ways it is new. With reuse, there's terrible stigma. I mean, it's for low-income people. It's for, I have to go to a used clothing store that smells bad. So it's overcoming a long stereotype against used things. I think the number one enemy of reuse is Madison Avenue, because you got to have the newest, latest, greatest model of Ford truck. You can't drive a 10-year-old Ford truck. You're not cool.
Yeah, I would agree. But I feel like we're finally getting to that point. I mean, there's been some research, especially with millennials and late Gen Xers, that they really are looking to reuse because they don't want what Madison Avenue is forcing down their throats. So I think there is a kind of fundamental shift happening. It's not there yet, and I do agree that recycling does get all the love and resources and capital and infrastructure. But I think, I see a shift happening.
Yeah, so do I, actually. And one final question. Nooks project mainly focused on communities. What would you, some tips that you could offer for communities just getting started on reuse and how they can go about it, and any of your ideas out there?
Was that for me?
Either, both.
Yeah.
I'll let Mary Ellen take that, and I'll answer by saying, on the smaller scale residential Habitat for Humanity restores and stuff, I think it very much can be at the community level. With our more industrial, big scale stuff, it really takes a nation to be able to absorb a lot of these waste streams. I mean, and I'll turn it over to Mary Ellen with this comment. We had a waste stream that we did from Purina, the dog food company, 6 semi-load waste stream. We had a truckload buyer in Wyoming, one in Michigan, and one in Ontario, Canada. So it took all of North America to absorb and find homes for one waste stream by corporate America.
Great.
Yeah. And a perfect kind of segue into that. The best thing that you can do for your community is start building the reuse community. Get around a table, start discussing what the challenges and opportunities are. Start with 5 people, grow, organically, whatever the case may be. But for something that kind of parlays into what Damon said, when we started the one in the reuse network in New York City, we started getting people around the table, and there had been a tractor-trailer load of health and beauty goods that came from L'Oreal, and not one organization could fill the need to get rid of this stuff. And by working together, they were able to find homes for pallets and pallets of health and beauty goods to go to, social services and furniture banks and food pantries and other social service agencies. So coming together, we can really help, and especially if we have tools now with repurposed materials and other exchanges, you got to get that local network happening so that you can take advantage of these other opportunities nationally and regionally.
Yeah, and this is Mary Ann. I just want to chime in too that, starting a reuse project or program, it doesn't matter whether you're in a rural or an urban area. It really doesn't. What it really takes is people being interested in sitting down at the table, as Mary Ellen said, and people bringing their ideas forth. You don't have to have a lot of money to get started. You don't have to have, you'll be able to identify the resources you have available to you by sitting down at the table and talking with people and finding out what everyone can bring to the table to make something happen.
Yeah, perfect example. Louisville, just a couple months ago, we got together with a roundtable of just 7 or 8 major players in the reuse community, the Habitat Restore, the Goodwill, a medical supply, the Creative Reuse Center, and just having that one conversation the city attended. Now they've started this whole collective impact reuse committee through the city. So it's just growing exponentially because of one meeting that happened, and we also showed a movie as well. So it's just getting that conversation rolling.
Well, it's 3:00, and I want to thank our speakers, Mary Ellen and Damon. It was really interesting to hear the different resources that you guys bring to the table for reuse. And I want to thank everyone who attended the webinar. I hope you found this helpful for your work, and just wanted to let you know we will be having one more webinar in this reuse webinar series, and that will take place later this spring, and we'll really look at NERC's Reuse Explorer Guide and present the information in that so you can get a better idea of different reuse activities that are happening around the country. And I thank you all, and I hope you join us for our last webinar.
Thanks, Marianne.